Yeah, as to Teal's point about stagnation, I was initially skeptical of this point and eventually came around to basically agreeing with it. Um, I don't love the formulation of flying cars versus 140 characters. I think that it's catchy, but it also kind of risks trivializing some of the progress that has happened in communications. Um, and it makes you part of why I was originally skeptical about this idea was that it seemed to be dismissing out of hand all of the progress in computing and the internet, and it seemed to be saying, all right, well, if you subtract out computers and the internet, what progress have we made? And it's kind of like asking, well, except for all the progress, where do we see any progress? And so that argument, when I first heard it, didn't really make sense to me. But I think there's a way to put it, which the bits versus atoms is a little more clear. I think what really made me come around to this point of view is studying the history of progress and basically deciding that it's not about bits versus atoms. It's about the fact that we've had progress in only bits when we really should have had progress in both bits and atoms at the same time. Or sometimes I like to say bits, atoms, cells, and joules. So things like manufacturing and construction are the atoms. Joules refers to energy and cells refers to biology. We really ought to be having progress on all fronts at once. And what's happened is that we've had uneven progress, where progress has continued to race ahead on some fronts while slowing down, and we've seen stagnation on other fronts. Now, when I first started studying progress, I wondered, well, maybe that's just how progress happens. Maybe there's kind of a fire hose of progress, and it gets pointed at one area or another, whatever is the most high ROI area. Maybe that's where all the resources flow into, and we make progress on that one thing for a while, and then we come around. But when I started looking at the history of progress, I realized that's not the case. We actually can make progress on all fronts at once. And the proof of this is really the late 19th and early 20th century. In the, say, 50 years from 1870 to 1920, just to pick a relatively arbitrary time period, we had, by my count, approximately 5 major revolutions or big breakthroughs on 5 fronts. We had our own equivalent of computers and the internet, which was the telephone and radio, both point-to-point and broadcast communications. That was our information revolution. 2, we had an energy revolution with electricity, electric lights, generators, and motors. The whole grid, the whole industry was developed during this time. 3, we had a second energy revolution with the internal combustion engine, and that led to a transportation revolution with the automobile and the airplane. 4, there was a revolution in synthetic chemistry and applied chemistry. We got synthetic plastics, synthetic fertilizer, and a bunch of things like that. And then number 5 was really in the germ theory and public health. We got some of the first vaccines, and we also got water filtration and sanitation that made our water much safer to drink. Started to get better food handling practices and hygiene practices, and started to really bring down mortality rates from infectious disease. So all 5 of those things were going on at once in that period. And today, we've basically had, again, progress in computers and the internet. We've had some really interesting progress in genetic engineering, although it feels like we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible there. And then, manufacturing, construction, energy, and transportation have really kind of lagged behind. And while there's been plenty of incremental improvements in those areas, we're still doing things in fundamentally the same ways that we were doing them at the end of the 1960s. We're still flying in fundamentally the same jet planes. In fact, they even fly a little slower these days. We got the Concorde briefly, but then it was shut down, and it was never widely accessible or affordable. We're still generating energy in pretty much the same ways. The nuclear revolution never happened. New technologies like solar are really starting to take off, but they're still very tiny. Manufacturing, construction, still the same basic techniques. We've had some new materials. So, it's not as if there's been zero progress in these areas, but compared to the past, it's really just, it's a slowdown. There's no way around it. Part of what was significant was the counterculture and the environmentalist movement were coming to were really rising into prominence. The first Earth Day was right around there. NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, was passed right around then, 70 or 71, can't remember. And that was quite significant. The purpose of NEPA really was to allow for a certain level of obstructionism. That may not be, I don't know, some people might not consider that a charitable way of putting it, but I think that, really the motivation was that it was too easy for the federal government to build things or to allow things to be built, and that there should be more process in front of this to sort of, if you wanted to put it the most charitably, to make sure we are considering environmental impacts. But the reality of that is what it means is that we, do more studies, which means taking more time, slowing things down, adding to the schedule and to the budget of everything, and giving things more chances to get delayed and ultimately sometimes canceled. So we deliberately made it more expensive to build almost anything, and NEPA has really spiraled out of control. I recommend reading Eli Dorado's explainer on NEPA, where he points out that where it has landed today and the size, the length of the environmental impact statements that are generated, even the number of, I forget the term for it, but essentially the findings of no impact, the statement you have to file if you're not going to have an impact, the amount of paperwork that is done for all that is orders of magnitude beyond what it used to be and what presumably anyone envisioned when they passed this law. It's not clear that Congress ever intended for environmental impact statements to be thousands of pages and to take years, literally years to assemble, and who knows how many man years went into that. The original ones were relatively brief, and just over time and through lawsuit after lawsuit, they've crept up and up. So that's why it's very hard. I mean, that's one piece, and that and similar things like it are a big part of why it's very hard to build pretty much anything in the country today, especially infrastructure, and that includes energy infrastructure, both the generation and the transmission lines. Even if you could build a power plant today, you have a hard time connecting it to the grid. So, and again, underlying that was a view that all of this material progress, industrial progress, was not true human progress at all. That it was a sort of false progress where we were increasing our capabilities, but at the destruction of the environment or at a cost to individual human lives, or so the thinking went. I mean, I don't agree with that framing. But if you look at court decisions from that time, there was one of the early NEPA decisions says that essentially NEPA was passed in order to control at long last the destructive engine of material, quote unquote, progress. So, when progress is viewed as a destructive engine, then people get to work trying to stop it. And so I think both at a cultural level in terms of attitudes and what people were saying about industrial progress in the media, in popular culture, starting to see it in education and in school and political rallies, and then also at the political level in terms of legal legislation and regulation that was going on. I think those things really combined to and then by the way, there was an oil shock in 1973, right? And so that energy got very expensive for a while, and I think a bunch of people decided the thing to do was to just try to use less energy, which, there's a famous, I don't remember I might be getting this wrong, but didn't Carter appear in a sweatshirt and told everybody to turn down the thermostat, right? Basically conserve, right? Save energy. So rather than solving our problems and in order to create more infrastructure, more wealth, more technology, more capabilities, more comfort and convenience for everybody, higher standards of living, we just decided maybe this is it. And maybe we should retreat, roll back, give up essentially the fight for progress, and not actually try to create so much, not try to make so much in material progress. And so it was really a sense of, I think, defeatism and fatalism that crept in. And there was there's a term that's used for this period. I think it was this particular speech that Carter gave, which was malaise. A malaise had set in, and there was something about the kind of can-do American spirit that was flagging right around that time.